Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. It's Thursday. I'm in New York, where I live. You've reached Venus Unplugged, your virtual heartbreak hotel. And this is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. If you want to download, you can go to Blog Talk Radio to download these episodes or listen to any others, or you can go to my website, LorraineNeithardt.com. You can book an appointment or listen to the blog or whatever you wish. So today, I am going to explore the concept of the descent. This is the period of life that we make a descent. We go into the underworld. And what is that all about? Okay, now every person has had some type of descent. I mean, they usually don't want it. A depression can be considered a descent. Okay, this is the time of the world, of the year in the West that we go into the underworld. We go into the journey. And what goes on inside. That's why so many things at this period of time, as we're moving into the holy season, so many things happen, or sadnesses happen, or deaths happen. Life is happening. It's opposite. And it's like, why does it always have to happen at the holidays? Well, particularly these holidays, because this is the time of the year, and if we could remember, and it seems to be in the air, as I walk around New York or be living my life, I'm acutely aware that everyone, and I mean everyone, has a secret that really would break your heart if you knew. So if we can kind of, don't become over sentimental, because that doesn't work either, okay? But just be aware. If somebody's kind of cranky, it's like step aside. Just get out of their path. They're wounded. Don't engage. Or if you find yourself reacting like, okay, which is very New York, try to pull it back a little. And if you can't, then at least examine. Were you in the underworld and someone disturbed you, or someone stepped on your tail, as they say? What's really going on? Or people will feel bad that they're not filled with joyous bliss at the holidays. Well, it's not the time yet. What is the purpose on a psychological level? What is the purpose of a descent? And anybody who's even remotely interested in the psychology and philosophy of Uncle Carl Jung, you're entering a world where you are going to have to wrestle with opposites, because that's the true nature of the Jungian work. It is the true nature of alchemy. Whenever we're in a wrestling match with the opposite, whether the opposite be shadow and light, which is usually the biggest one, or conscious and unconscious, that's an opportunity to say, whoa, what am I really dealing with? Okay, so I know what I may be upset about. What's its opposite? Or trying to, when you have a feeling something is missing, what is it? What can I see? And of course, perfect strangers and children can see it. Something is going on in your blind spot. Your blind spot is where your opposites hide. Of course, it's easy for when you're looking or watching a movie, whatever, you can always see the blind spot. Like, uh-oh, that's going to collide. But that's also what the story is about. So, the descent and sacrifices and transformation, that's what this time of the year is about. It happens all the time, but particularly now, all right? So the motif of descent, it's commonplace in Jungian work. And it's equal both in men and women. When they go, they may respond to it differently, but men also go into the descent. So when we make descents or introversions, okay, it's like, leave me alone, world. I'm pulling the covers over my head. That's a descent. You see, we have to make these descents because we need to be in service of life. And we need to go into the underworld to get more of the energy that's held in the unconscious by the self, capital S, self. All right. And we have to keep on making these descents until we're strong enough for the journey. We make these little descents, okay? And then we're willing to sacrifice libido, life force, for the release. So the hardest descents are those to the primitive kind of labyrinths of the unconscious and the depths. And we can experience what feels like a dismemberment. Like when we're fragmented, sometimes we can wake up like that. It's like, God, I just don't feel myself today. I feel like I'm all over the place. So then say, well, am I in a state of dismemberment? Has Psyche dismembered me while I was sleeping, symbolically, obviously, because I'm being rearranged? Don't panic. You're being rearranged. So there are many descents that we can make. Some of the easy ones that you've undergone is just to kind of loosen rigid concepts and raise energy. Okay, that's why things reverse themselves. So when people get into the feeling or believing that they know the absolute truth, well, that's the kiss of death. Because the opposite will always make a fool out of you. All truths are built on shaky ground. And the more we grow and mature, the more we realize the folly of this is absolutely true. Well, perhaps today, won't be tomorrow. So the deepest descents, they lead to radical reorganizations and transformations of the conscious personality. It's a very interesting book called Descent to the Goddess, and it's a way of initiation for women, and by Sylvia Pereira, P-E-R-E-R-A, which is wonderful to read, particularly if there's a loss going on, because we can get so caught up in the loss, but without meaning, we're going to make this journey and not come back with any gold because we don't understand the meaning of this dismemberment, or why do we have to have these losses in life, or everything can't be good. It needs to have its opposite, because that's what gives it meaning. So the story of Inanna is a descent. She's the queen of heaven and earth. It's actually a fabulous poem. She's the queen of heaven and earth, and then she's called forth to go into the underworld to meet her dark sister, Ereshkigal. And as she's making her descent, each one of her powers are taken away. At first, it's her crown is taken away, and her scepter, and 7 things are taken away, and it's the 7 rungs. We know what that's about. 7 is the chakras, the completion, and to descend into the underworld. Now, why would a goddess who's whooping it up here on Earth has all the ultimate power. Why would she make this journey into the underworld? It's because her dark sister is a twin aspect of herself, or the dark mother, meaning the unknown side of the great mother and ourselves. Just like Persephone, she's forced. See the difference between Inanna and Persephone. Inanna goes willingly. She's a little reluctant, but she's willing. Persephone is tricked. She's just walking along the fields and smelling flowers, and the next thing she knows, she's taken by Pluto into the underworld. And for those people who are into astrology, everybody knows the dark Pluto. I actually see Pluto as the dark Christ figure who gives you illumination when you come up from under the crucifixion of the inner world. And by crucifixion, I mean, we're broken apart. What is crucified? Our precious beliefs. Or the person who we love so dearly shows how deeply human and disappointing they can be. And then we find out, we make a descent. Like, wow, I really put the robe of golden robe. I made this person a king or a queen, and I projected all my greatest good onto them, and now they're completely human. And we can get very angry at that. Why? Because on a much subtler level, they're rejecting our perfect projection. And they go like, this doesn't fit me. This belongs to you. Of course, we don't experience that. We experience that as disappointment. But if something like that is happening in your life, just step back a little, breathe in, go sit in the corner, calm down, get under the covers, whatever you want to do, and then ask yourself, why did I need to project onto that person? Shadow or light? We're asking, we burden love very much with our behavior. We can't help it. It's the nature of being human. But if something like that has happened, or you're deeply disappointed, say, okay, I wanted them to, be the perfect gentleman. And then I find out they've got terrible manners. And whatever the terrible manners may be. And then we have to say, all right, what did I expect? What did I assume? And so our journey into the underworld, we're going to find out all this stuff. I don't think there's any mirrors in the underworld, so we keep on bumping into our own selves. And the part, and it's not even that you're doing anything incorrect or wrong or anything. We just must. It is the nature of Psyche. She calls us into the underworld because there's raw energy that we need to get to the underworld. I'm reminded there's a saying. How does that one go? It's like the spirituality of for those who've been to heaven, but consciousness are for those. The energy is we get it from hell, which is true. When we want to make that everything to be positive, we want it all to be nice, and it's not going to work. Not going to work. We need the positive. We need to contain that. That is very important to have, but we also need its opposite, because what makes us grow is whatever we don't know about ourselves. So the journey, if we're going to claim consciousness, you're going to have to make these journeys every so often. And the journey into what you don't know about yourself, the journey into the hidden treasures. Now, the ego does not like this messy business. It wants everything sweetness and light. But true consciousness is not just about sweetness and light. It's about these descents. How does one find new energy? I mean, for those who, I'm not talking about chronic depression. That has a whole different story. But, we just have a moment of depression or disappointment, whatever it may be. And then it's like, okay, that's my call to the underworld. That's what's happening. And what is that underworld whispering to you? You could also draw a picture of the underworld and what you think it's about. That's always telling. Just whatever comes into your fantasy world, see what's in there, okay? Because there's a hidden story in the underworld that we don't want to know about, but we need to know about it because we're going to trip over it. That's why all those weird things happen in our life. It's our hidden story come to life, and there it's standing in your living room or a Kmart or something. And it takes a lot of work. But that's what we're here for this profound journey of consciousness. And that's also what love is. It's this tremendous amount of work. It's the alchemy of love. It's the dark side of love. The unknown treasures. And the reason we experience it as dark because the ego doesn't understand and doesn't have control. That's so the difference between a dream and a nightmare. A dream, of course, is always hinting at a task we have to fulfill. So when we write down the dreams, that's one of the things we look for. What is the task that my psyche is asking me to fulfill? Now, a nightmare, panic, pan, that's like a definitely pay attention to the nightmare is given because the psyche wants to override the ego because the ego thinks it understands everything, and it gives us a nightmare, and then we really pay attention. Not meant to scare us. It's the bell, the awakening, saying pay attention, get conscious. And it's okay not to understand, but if we can hold the tension of the opposites long enough, we will begin to understand. So as we go into this journey, wherever you go, that's how you find out, who am I really? So it's kind of interesting how, and you'll see it if you're just observing, okay, or if you're really honest with yourself, it's like that people can really hurt one another, or you can hurt somebody and pretend you didn't mean it? No. And if you have people in your life who are hurting you like that on a continual basis, walk away. Disengage. The healthy response to being wounded or hurt is to step away. Don't get into an argument with them. You'll never get it. It just won't work. Okay, so it's important for you to know you don't have to be part of somebody else's suffering. And if you are in a situation that the suffering, then just internally go into the underworld because that's where your answer is. Go and just kind of close your eyes and imagine yourself going inside. What would the soul be like? I mean, we all feel that we have a soul. We have a soul, but we are also ensouled. That the soul is constantly, it's the atmosphere and it's all around us. And that's what the soul is about. I was watching, there was on YouTube, it was on Carl Gustav Jung and the Red Book. Google it on YouTube. It's very interesting. Some scholars, 4 scholars, discuss Jung's Red Book. And his Red Book was his journey, conscious journey into the underworld. He didn't have it published till after he died because he just thought everybody would think he was crazy. But it took 100 years, and now the world's ready to look at his incredible imagination and journey and being able to go into his underworld and find the images in there and then dialoguing with them. Which is also something you can do, too, is draw pictures or draw a picture with the opposite hand of your dominant hand, because then you don't have any control and you get much closer to, on a feeling level, to what's going on in there. And once you begin to understand that the way of the underworld is perfect, it's an understanding. There was a quote in this YouTube I was watching, and it was that God is that, they asked Jung what he thinks God is, and he says, God is that which crosses my willful path. Now, isn't that true? You know, we think we have the truth, or we're going along, everything's being this way, and then something happens. I was like, oh no, what's that? That just disrupts everything. Or that person is so annoying. Can't they see that they're in my way? And that's an aspect of God, because we're on our willful path. A softer way of looking at that is the old saying, you know, if we want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that will certainly make them laugh. And that's why these disruptive things happen, to keep us constantly in an ebb and a flow. It's not stagnant. And the more we try to, the ego wants to lock on to that's the truth and that's the way it has to be, you're headed for trouble. And you'll take everybody with you that's standing next to you if you can't recognize, oh, wait a second, I'm being edited. Life is editing my belief system. It's not taking it away. It's just saying, could you add something onto this? You know, we start with a room and we wind up with a castle. That's what happens. And we create meaning so that we can face the unknown. That's why we need meaning in our lives. So it's important to read myths and fairy tales and write down your dreams. And, you know, we're always telling stories to one another in our search for meaning. Positive and negative, in and out. You know, you create meaning. But at the bottom of meaning, you know, it kind of sways. Something, you know, it's always moving. It's always moving. This thing called truth in life. And that ultimately what you believe gets dissolved and then transforms and then comes back again in another form. Because the truth is, that's huge, the truth. And I think the older you get, the less interested you are in the truth, and just more interested in the process, not the ultimate meaning of things, because you realize how huge it all is and profound, and we wouldn't be able to use it all anyway. So that's what happens in this inner task. That's what individuation is about. It's a constant inner task to live what might happen to you in the inside, to see it being played out. Very important. Not blame. Observation with a loving heart. No opinion. The ego is the one that has all the opinions. You know, do you ever notice how when people are just, I mean, I'm not talking about malignant narcissism, which is just evil, okay, but very often people who have a really strong negative streak, man, God, are they strong-willed. I always marvel at their will. It's like, wow, you're using all that will just to have yourself be right? It's exhausting just watching. And the more they push on it, and the more they oppress, and the more, you need to pull back, and you need to say, well, you know, just that much will, get out of their lane. Just go window shopping, or read a book, or write a poem, or kiss your animal, okay, or a child or something. And that's everything that starts happening at the holidays. when I discussed last week. We go to the holidays, or now the holy season is here, and we have all these fantasies about Christmas, tra-la-la, and everything that's going to happen. Well, not necessarily, because we keep on compulsively going back to that journey called Christmas holiday or New Year's, and really want to get it right this time. You're really going to get that holiness, or you're really going to get that New Year's Eve. And the truth of that is it's what you bring to the party. And if you're in a fantasy or a regression or the underworld or a descent, you're going to try to make something happen that never happened. If it didn't happen when you're 7, it's not going to happen when you're 40 in that way. You can make it yourself. You can create it yourself. But if you're going back to the Christmas crime, okay, if anybody wants to see how hilarious, it's an old film. It's called The Ref, and it's like kind of the dark side of Christmas. It's hilarious, okay? And we all know those dark sides of Christmas. So those are descents, too. So by the time we get to the Day of Light on the 25th, it's because we've been in the underworld. And then the birth of your divine child, the Holy One within, is born. That's part of what you're going down there for, is to retrieve that holiness that is hidden, the treasure that is hidden within. Once again, that's what the descent is about. And then, of course, as soon as we think we have the answer, that's the point when you'll begin to search all over again. It's kind of waves and particles. Love is filled with waves and particles. There was a beautiful poem. Actually, it's a saying from John O'Donohue, and anyone who doesn't know, he passed over a couple of years ago, but a brilliant poet. This is a quote. There is the solitude of suffering when you go through darkness that is lonely, intense, and terrible. Words become powerless to express your pain. What others hear from your words is so distant and different from what you are actually suffering. When you get that feeling, you're in the underworld. You're in that place. And you're suffering consciousness. You're suffering that you don't know. You're suffering gross pains. That's what suffering is about. That's what it's there for. So the English lady is going to tell me I've got a couple of minutes, and what I want to leave you with is the Velveteen Rabbit. And a quote from that. And it is, this is when the Velveteen Rabbit asks the horse, like, how do you get real? How do you become real? And if you don't know the story of the Velveteen Rabbit, or you've forgotten, definitely buy yourself the book and read it to your inner child, because inner children and all adults love this. So he says, the quote is, you become, it takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes don't see as well, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. So, get a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. I mean, it's a story about a stuffed bunny's individuation process into consciousness, if you want to look at it that way. It's a delightful story. It warms the heart, and it's got great, great sound advice of how to become real. So, my darlings, next week, who knows what we'll be talking about, but whatever it is, it will be timely. Okay? It's your host, Llorraine Neithardt. Telephone number 212-757-8914, or go to my website, LorraineNeithardt.com. And Till we meet again. Bye.
They're gonna kill the love of my life. Casey! If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.